I was 29 when I finally admitted the truth I had spent most of my life pretending not to see. My parents had never seen me the way they saw my siblings. I was the afterthought, the reliable one, the daughter, who didn't need anything because she had taught herself not to ask. But the moment I opened that thick envelope in my parents' kitchen, all of the quiet disappointments and hidden wounds from my childhood came rushing back with a force that nearly knocked the air out of me. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was babysitting my nephew while cleaning up their kitchen like I always did when they needed me. A pile of mail sat on the counter and one envelope stuck out half open. The glossy logo printed across the front made me pause. It wasn't a bill or a letter or some ad. It was from one of those luxury cruise lines I'd only ever seen in commercials. My curiosity got the better of me, and I slid the papers out. In 3 seconds, my stomach dropped. It was a full itinerary, a week-long cruise, fully paid for with my parents' names, printed neatly alongside my brother, my sister, her husband, and even their kids. My hands trembled as I stared at the dates. 2 days from now. I reread it again and again as though the paper might change if I willed it hard enough. It didn't. The truth screamed back at me while I had been led to believe money was too tight for any of us to take vacations. My entire family was packing their bags for a trip they hadn't even told me about. 2 months earlier, I had been sitting in this same kitchen when my parents explained how difficult things were financially. My mom had clasped my hand, her eyes serious, and told me that sometimes we all had to make sacrifices. It's not responsible for any of us to take vacations right now, she'd said. And because I loved them, because I always believed them, I canceled my own long-awaited trip with friends. It had been the first real vacation I'd planned in years, something I had worked overtime for skipped nights out, for saved every spare penny for. I let it go because my family needed me. Now, staring at those cruise tickets, I understood. They hadn't just left me out, they had lied. And the worst part was it wasn't even a careless oversight. The dates were carefully chosen to fall during my busiest season at work, when I could never take time off. They had planned it to make sure I couldn't come along even if I found out. I heard my mom's footsteps in the hall and shoved the papers back into the envelope just as she walked in, humming cheerfully. "Thanks for watching him today," she said with a smile, reaching into the fridge for a bottle of water. I forced my lips into a smile of my own, swallowing down the burning in my throat. "No problem," I managed. She had no idea that I knew. She had no guilt in her voice, no hesitation. Just casual gratitude, as though nothing was wrong. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I let the memories play like film reels of my life. They weren't isolated moments, I realized now. They were a pattern. When I was 6, I had begged for dance lessons. My mom sighed, said they were too expensive, and I believed her. A month later, my sister got horseback riding lessons, weekly private sessions they called, an investment in her passion. When I was 12, I wanted a new bike. My brother got one for his birthday, shiny and perfect, while I was handed his old one with torn seats and wobbly handlebars. At 15, I worked odd jobs and skipped lunches to save up for a school trip to Washington, D.C., only to be told a week before that we couldn't afford it. A month later, my brother went skiing with his friends, paid for entirely by my parents. By the time I was in college, I had stopped asking. My parents funded my sister's wedding in full venue catering gown, everything, while my college graduation earned me only a card. My brother, reckless and irresponsible, racked up debt after debt, and each time my parents bailed him out while telling me how proud they were of my independence. Independence I had never chosen. Independence I had been forced into. As I sat with those cruise papers still vivid in my mind, I realized, with a hollow ache, that my whole life had been building to this moment. I had always been the one they relied on, the babysitter, the problem solver, the one who covered bills quietly when they came up short. They had never needed to worry about me because I had taught myself not to need. And now, when it came to joy, to celebration, to something as simple as a family vacation, I wasn't even worth an invitation. Something shifted inside me then. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost gentle, but it was final. I knew I couldn't keep playing this role, couldn't keep giving everything while receiving nothing. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't scream or accuse. I just decided I was done. 2 days later, the test came. My sister called in a rush, asking if I could watch the kids for the weekend because she had an extra shift. Normally, I would have said yes without thinking. This time I didn't. "I can't," I said simply. Silence filled the line. "What, but you never have plans on weekends?" She wasn't wrong. I had always made myself available. But not anymore. Not anymore. "Sorry," I repeated before hanging up. The text began shortly after my mother asking why I had refused her words laced with confusion. Then my brother called, asking for $100 to tide him over until payday. I thought about the luxury trip he had just returned from, the countless times I had lent him money I'd never seen again. "Sorry," I said evenly. "Money's tight." I almost laughed at the irony. We all have to make sacrifices, right? They didn't understand at first. But soon, the cracks began to show. My refusal to fall back into my old role unsettled them more than I expected. At first, they tried to brush it off. My mom called with her usual cheerful tone, asking if everything was all right, noting that I seemed a little distant. I gave her a vague answer about focusing on work and let her sit with the silence. That was when she slipped, saying, "We missed you this past week." The words nearly made me choke. They missed me. The people who had boarded a cruise without me, who had carefully planned around my absence, dared to say they missed me. I forced a light laugh and replied, "That's funny. I didn't even know you were gone." The pause on the line was heavy, but I didn't rescue her from it. "Anyway, hope you had fun," I added casually before hanging up. That was the beginning of the unraveling. My sister, unable to rely on me, was forced to pay for babysitters. The costs quickly swallowed whatever extra money she made from additional shifts. My brother, always skating on the edge of financial disaster, had no one left to bail him out when payday loans and bad decisions caught up with him. And my parents, so used to me plugging the leaks in their lives, were suddenly scrambling as small problems became large ones. They tried reaching out, of course. My mom showed up at my apartment one evening with a bag of homemade food, smiling too wide her eyes, scanning my place, like she might find proof of some hidden crisis. She set the food down on the counter and said gently, "You've been different. You're avoiding your family." I smiled faintly. "I'm not avoiding anyone. I've just been busy." Her lips pressed together. "Are you mad at me?" I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch. "Why would I be mad?" I asked softly. She blinked. Because of the cruise, the words seemed to tumble out before she could stop them. Her face drained of color. I didn't move. "Then, what was it like?" I asked. She fumbled, trying to explain that they hadn't thought I would want to go, that I was always busy with work. I tilted my head. "Interesting, since you didn't even ask." Her defenses crumbled as I continued calm and steady. "It always is personal. It always has been." She had no words left, so she fell back on old habits, trying to laugh it off. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It was just a trip." My smile froze her in place. "You're right," I said, "and now it's just me being busy. Nothing personal." When she left, I felt something inside me shift even further. I had held my ground, and for once, she was the one scrambling to justify herself. But my family didn't give up. The very next day, my father appeared outside my office building. Through the glass, I saw him waiting his stance, restless, his hands shoved into his pockets. He caught up with me as I walked toward my car. "Jess," he called. "Come on, don't be like this." I unlocked my car door without pausing. "Be like what?" He huffed. "Unreasonable. Your mother's worried sick." I turned, finally meeting his eyes. Worried about what that I finally caught on his jaw tightened. "You think we left you out on purpose? That's ridiculous." I leaned against my car, the cold metal grounding me. "Is it you planned the trip during the one time of year you knew I couldn't take time off?" "That wasn't an accident." He scoffed. "So we're supposed to schedule our whole lives around you?" I shook my head. "No, just not lie to me." That shut him up, but only for a moment. "We didn't tell you, because we knew you'd overreact." A laugh bubbled out of me, sharp and humorless. So the solution was to prove me right. "You've always been independent," he argued. "We figured you wouldn't care about something like this." His words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they reflected the story they had told themselves for years. Independence wasn't something I had chosen. It was something forced on me. I breathed in slowly. Funny how my independence never stopped you from asking for money or babysitting or favors. You never thought I was too independent to be used. He flinched at my tone. "Jess, no!" I snapped, more force in my voice than I'd ever used with him. "You don't get to twist this. You needed me all my life. I needed you once, and you lied to me." His face hardened, but I was already climbing into my car. I closed the door, locked it, and drove away without a backward glance. That night, I took the step I knew would change everything. I blocked their numbers. First my sister, then my brother, then my parents. Then I left the family group chat without a word. Within minutes, my phone lit up with frantic calls, emails, even messages through work. One email from my mom read, "Jess, this is childish. We're still your family. Call me back." I deleted it without a second thought. What happened next surprised me more than anything. They fell apart quickly, far quicker than I had imagined. My sister lost hours at work when she couldn't secure reliable childcare. My brother, without his constant safety net, spiraled into financial chaos. And my parents, without my quiet contributions covering their shortfalls, began to drown under bills they had ignored for years. A week after I cut contact, my mom's voice reached me again through voicemail, strained and weary. "Jess, sweetheart, I know you're upset, but things are really difficult right now. Your sister is struggling. Your brother's having a hard time. We just need a little help getting through this rough patch. Call me back." I didn't. Another message followed the next day, this time tinged with desperation. "You're making things harder than they need to be. I know you don't want to see us suffer." But I had seen myself suffer for years while they looked away. The true panic came soon after. Calls from unfamiliar numbers flooded my phone until I finally answered one. It was my sister, her tone sharp and frantic. "Are you seriously going to let Mom and Dad lose the house?" I froze. "What are you talking about? They're behind on the mortgage?" she snapped. "They were covering for me and Brandon when we needed help, and now they're screwed. They're weeks away from losing everything." Her words hit me like a slap. They had gone on a luxury vacation, had guilt-tripped me into canceling my own, and now they were facing foreclosure. "What do you expect me to do?" I asked flatly. "Oh my God, Jess, are you serious? Mom and Dad are going to be homeless." Her desperation didn't move me. "Would you take me in if I lost my job tomorrow? If I begged for help?" The silence that followed was long, cold, and telling. "That's not the same," she whispered finally. "It is the same," I replied. Her anger flared then. "You're being vindictive? We're supposed to be family. I thought of every birthday, every graduation, every dream dismissed with too expensive, while my siblings' wants were funded without hesitation. "We were supposed to be family," I said softly, "when you all left me out." Then I hung up. This time, there was no guilt in my chest, only clarity. The following days brought more silence, broken only by one final confrontation I didn't see coming. My mother appeared at my apartment door, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. "We have nowhere else to go," she whispered. The weight of her words settled in the air. For the first time, I believed her. They had run out of lifelines, exhausted every resource, and I was their last resort. I held the doorframe, steadying myself. "If I was the one standing here," I asked quietly, "would you let me in?" Tears spilled down her face. "You're our daughter." I nodded. "And I was your daughter when you left me out." My voice cracked, but I didn't waver. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." Her pleas followed me as I closed the door. I leaned against it, listening to her cry, her voice breaking as she begged one more time. Then finally, I heard her footsteps fade. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet. For the first time in my life, my phone wasn't buzzing with last-minute requests or frantic messages demanding my time, money, or energy. The silence was unsettling at first, like stepping out of a storm into a room so still you hear your own heartbeat. I had been conditioned to believe my worth was tied to being useful, to solving problems, to sacrificing myself so others could thrive. Without those constant demands, I was left with only myself. I filled the empty hours carefully. I started taking long walks after work, listening to music I had never had time to enjoy. I picked up an old hobby sketching that I'd abandoned years ago when babysitting shifts and family obligations swallowed every weekend. I read books for the sheer pleasure of them. For once, my evenings belonged to me. But with the peace came another companion I hadn't expected: grief. Grief for the little girl who had swallowed disappointment after disappointment. Grief for the teenager who had saved pennies for a trip, only to be told she couldn't go while her brother skied down mountain slopes on her parents' dime. Grief for the young woman who had learned to stop asking, stop needing, because needing meant rejection. I carried her with me every day, and though it hurt, it also clarified something. My family's betrayal with the cruise wasn't a sudden storm. It was the inevitable result of years of erosion, tiny injustices that had carved me into someone who believed she had to earn love by being useful. Meanwhile, the distance between us became a chasm. My sister's texts turned from angry demands to pitiful pleas. "Just help with the kids for one weekend, please. They miss you." I stared at the words, remembering every time she had dismissed my needs as less important than hers. I didn't reply. My brother left a single voicemail, slurred and bitter, accusing me of abandoning them. I deleted it without listening twice. The only messages that rattled me were from my parents. My mother's tone shifted from guilt-tripping to desperate bargaining. "Jess, we'll pay you back this time, I promise. We just need to catch up on a couple bills." My father tried a different angle, appealing to duty. "You can't just turn your back on your family. We raised you. You owe us." That word "owe" burned through me like acid. How could I owe them when every milestone of mine had been ignored, every dream of mine dismissed? I thought about the congratulations card at graduation sitting on my desk, while my sister walked down the aisle in a designer gown my parents had happily funded. I thought about the years of babysitting I had done for free, the thousands of dollars I had quietly handed over to keep their lights on or cover their rent. If anything, they owed me. I didn't respond to their calls, and as the weeks went by, the updates trickled in through mutual acquaintances. My sister had been given fewer hours at work, and was now juggling part-time gigs while drowning in childcare costs. My brother's car had been repossessed. My parents were officially behind on their mortgage. They were crumbling without me, the safety net they had always taken for granted. It wasn't that I wanted them to suffer. But for the first time, their suffering wasn't my responsibility. Then came the night my father showed up again. I had thought the blocked numbers would stop them, but I hadn't considered desperation. I found him waiting outside my apartment building, leaning heavily against the wall. He looked older, his shoulders sagging in a way I'd never seen before. "Jess," he said when I approached, his voice gravelly. "We're losing the house." I froze, the words echoing in the stairwell. "That's not my problem," I said, though. My voice trembled. His eyes narrowed. "It's your family's problem, which makes it yours." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're punishing us, but you're only punishing yourself. You'll regret this when we're gone." Something in me snapped. Years of swallowed anger surged up all at once. "No," I said sharply. "I will regret every year I wasted trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I will regret every time I let you convince me I didn't need what everyone else got handed freely. But I will not regret saving myself." His face reddened, and for once, he had no ready retort. I turned, walked inside, and left him standing in the dark. After that, the visit stopped. The calls slowed, then ceased. Weeks stretched into months, and I realized they had finally accepted what I already knew I was gone. But freedom, I learned, doesn't erase scars. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I had been too harsh. The image of my mother crying at my door haunted me. The words my father had spat, "You'll regret this," echoed in quiet moments. And yet, every time doubt crept in, I remembered the envelope on the counter. The proof that they hadn't just forgotten me. They had chosen to exclude me. I remembered my sister's silence when I asked if she would take me in. And I remembered the hollow ache of years spent waiting for fairness that never came. I started therapy, something I had once dismissed as indulgent, but now saw as survival. I told my therapist about the cruise, about the childhood memories I couldn't shake. She listened quietly, then said something I hadn't considered. "You've been grieving your family your whole life. The difference now is you've stopped bargaining for their love." That hit me harder than I expected. She was right. I had always believed that if I just gave more time, more money, more obedience, then maybe one day I'd be seen. But the cruise showed me the truth. No amount of sacrifice could earn me a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. As spring bled into summer, I began building a life that was mine. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted from because I was always too busy babysitting. I traveled not to an expensive resort, but to a quiet cabin upstate where I spent a week reading and hiking without checking my phone. I saved money not to bail someone else out, but to invest in my own future. Each step was small, but together they felt revolutionary. And then one afternoon, months after I had closed that door on my crying mother, I received a letter. Handwritten, the envelope addressed in my father's steady hand. For a moment, I considered throwing it away, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page. "Jess," it began, "we don't understand why you've done this, but we know we hurt you. We thought you were strong enough not to need us. Maybe that was our mistake. We're not asking you to come back, but if you ever do, the door is open." I sat with that letter for a long time. It wasn't the apology I had wanted, not really. It was still wrapped in excuses, still refusing to name the truth of what they had done. But for the first time, there was an admission, however small, that they had failed me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the most important lesson I had learned was this: my healing couldn't depend on their remorse. My peace couldn't wait for their recognition. I had to build those things for myself, even if it meant walking away forever. By the time autumn rolled around, I had settled into my new life. It wasn't perfect. I still had nights where the weight of what I'd lost pressed heavy on my chest. But it was mine. For once, I wasn't existing in the shadow of other people's needs. I had a routine that revolved around me: weekend markets, dinners with friends, evenings spent painting in my small living room. Slowly, I realized I wasn't waiting for their calls anymore. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. The distance gave me perspective. I saw clearly now how my family had relied on my silence. Every time I swallowed my anger as a child, every time I gave up something I wanted as a teenager, every time I showed up without complaint as an adult, I was training them to believe my sacrifices didn't cost me anything. They thought I was strong because I never cried in front of them. They thought I didn't care because I never demanded fairness. They thought excluding me wouldn't hurt because I never said it did. In truth, it had broken me a little at a time until that envelope finally shattered the illusion completely. News of them still reached me, though never directly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned my sister had been forced to sell her car after falling too far behind on payments. My brother had moved in with a friend because he couldn't afford rent. My parents were still in their house, but barely. Each update carried with it a familiar temptation, a flicker of the old instinct to fix everything. But then I remembered the hollow seat at the table that had been mine, left empty on purpose while they sailed the ocean without me. I reminded myself that stepping back into that role would only confirm what they had always believed, that I would sacrifice myself no matter how they treated me. It was during this season that I started to reflect not just on what they had taken from me, but on what I had gained. Freedom, yes, but also clarity. I saw how my whole identity had been wrapped around being the responsible one, the one who never needed help. And now, without that role to anchor me, I had the chance to define myself in a way I never had before. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter. I wasn't just the safety net. I was a woman who could choose her own life, her own priorities, her own worth. That realization came into sharp focus one evening when I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We sat in a cafe catching up, and at one point she leaned back and said, "You seem lighter." I blinked, surprised. She smiled. "Like you're not carrying everyone else anymore." Her words nearly brought me to tears. Someone saw it. Someone noticed the change. And it wasn't because I had given more, it was because I had finally stopped. But even as I grew stronger, my family grew weaker. It wasn't long before the next attempt to pull me back came. A letter from my sister, this time scrawled in rushed handwriting. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mom and Dad are weeks away from foreclosure. If you care at all, you'll step in before they lose the house. I don't have the money. Brandon doesn't either. This is on you." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and set it aside. For years I had been told I was independent, self-sufficient, fine on my own. And now, in their desperation, they were admitting the opposite, that without me, they were floundering. It was almost poetic. They had built their lives on the assumption that I would always be there to catch them. And now with me gone, the ground had given way. A week later, my mother returned. This time, she didn't cry. She looked tired, older, her face drawn with the weight of everything she carried. "Jess," she said quietly, standing at my door, "we made mistakes." For a moment, my heart lurched. Was this it? The apology I had waited for my entire life? But then she continued, "We just need you to help us one more time. After that, we'll figure things out. Just one more time." The ache in my chest hardened into resolve. It wasn't an apology. It was another request, another demand disguised as humility. And I realized then that they might never be capable of the kind of accountability I wanted. They would always find a way to twist things, to minimize, to shift blame. I couldn't change that. But I could change whether I allowed myself to be pulled into it. I can't, I said softly. Her eyes glistened. Please. I steadied my breath. If I were the one at your door right now, if I had lost everything, would you let me in? Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The silence was all the answer I needed. I closed the door gently, leaning against it as the sound of her footsteps faded down the hall. My chest was tight, my throat raw, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I was abandoning them. I felt like I was saving myself. That night, I thought about the younger version of me, the 6-year-old who had wanted dance lessons, the 12-year-old riding a bike with broken brakes, the 15-year-old watching her brother head off on a ski trip while she stayed home. I thought about the woman I had become, who canceled vacations, who paid bills that weren't hers, who babysat children while her own dreams gathered dust. And I realized I couldn't undo the past, but I could choose differently for the future. It wasn't easy. I still wrestled with guilt. Society tells us we owe our families everything, no matter how they treat us. But what I had finally come to understand was this family is not defined by blood. Family is defined by love, respect, and reciprocity. And by that definition, my family had let me go a long time ago. I was just finally accepting it. In the weeks that followed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for them to change. I wasn't going to hold my breath for an apology that might never come. I was going to move forward with my life, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who chose herself. Winter came, and with it a quiet I had never known before. Holidays passed without invitations, without forced gatherings, where I played the role of caretaker, while everyone else enjoyed themselves. For the first time, I spent Thanksgiving with friends who welcomed me not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. Christmas morning was simple coffee, a book, a long walk in the cold air. But it was peaceful. There were no guilt-laden phone calls, no last-minute crises, no weight pressing down on me. Still, there were moments when the old ache returned. Driving past my parents' house one evening, I noticed the porch light dark, the lawn unkempt, the windows shut tight. The house of my childhood, the house that had seen birthdays and fights, and laughter, and tears, looked abandoned, fragile. A pang of sadness pierced me. This was where I had grown up, where I had learned to hide disappointment, where I had first begun to swallow words I wanted to scream. Now, it was slipping away, and I wasn't there to stop it. But then, just as quickly, another thought followed. It wasn't my job to stop it. The house was theirs, the choices were theirs, the consequences were theirs. My entire life, I had been asked to pay the price for their decisions. This time, they would pay it themselves. Weeks later, I received one final letter. No pleas this time, no demands. Just 4 words written in my father's shaky handwriting. We don't understand you. I stared at the page for a long time. He was right. They didn't understand me. They had never tried to. And that was the heart of it all. For years, I had begged for scraps of recognition of fairness of love measured out equally. I had twisted myself into knots to be useful enough, responsible enough, strong enough to finally be seen. But they had never really seen me. They had only seen what I could do for them. Folding that letter, I felt a strange relief. I didn't need them to understand me anymore. Understanding myself was enough. I poured my energy into the life I was building. I saved money for my own future instead of theirs. I traveled again, this time to the resort I had canceled a year earlier. Walking along the shoreline with friends who cheered me on, who valued me for who I was, I realized how much joy I had denied myself. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing on the outside of life watching others live it. I was in it. Looking back, the cruise wasn't just a betrayal. It was a revelation. It showed me what had been true all along, that I had been excluded not by accident, but by design. And once I saw that truth, I couldn't go back. Sometimes people ask me if I regret cutting them off. The answer is complicated. I regret that it came to this. I regret that my family never gave me the chance to belong the way I deserved. I regret that so much of my childhood and young adulthood was spent in the shadow of unfairness. But do I regret choosing myself? No, not for a second. Because here's what I've learned. Love that has to be earned through sacrifice isn't love at all. Family that only values you for what you give them isn't family. It's dependency, dressed up as affection. And sometimes the bravest, hardest choice you can make is to walk away from the people who refuse to see your worth. I don't know what will happen to them in the years ahead. Maybe they'll lose the house. Maybe they'll drift further into struggle. Maybe one day they'll reach out again claiming change, asking for another chance. And maybe I'll answer, or maybe I won't. But whatever happens, I know this: I am no longer the forgotten daughter waiting for fairness that will never come. I am a woman who chose herself finally, fully, unapologetically. And if you're listening to this and see yourself in my story, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been asked to give until nothing was left, I want you to hear me when I say you are allowed to choose yourself too. You are allowed to stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are allowed to walk away from what breaks you, even if it wears the name family. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is not giving more to those who drain you, but giving everything to yourself. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to watch the next episode for another powerful true story.